My name is Elias Vance, and my home is a small, weathered ranch house nestled deep in the Nevada desert. For 40 years, the only company I've truly known has been the endless expanse of sand, the distant hum of the highway, and the silent, watchful stars above. I moved here after life got a little too loud, too complicated. The desert promised solitude, and it delivered. Every night, after tending to my few head of cattle, I'd sit on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, listening to the coyotes serenade the coming darkness. It was a simple life, a quiet life, exactly what I thought I wanted. I believed I knew every shadow, every sound, every secret this land held. But the desert, I've learned, keeps its greatest mysteries for those who are truly alone, those who are truly listening. One sweltering summer evening, the air was unusually still, heavy with an almost electrical charge. My old dog, Rusty, usually a calm old soul, was restless, pacing the porch and whimpering softly at the sky. I tried to calm him, patting his head, but his gaze remained fixed upwards, past the last sliver of twilight. Then, a light, unlike any I'd ever seen, began to bloom on the horizon. It wasn't an airplane, nor a distant town. This was a pulsing, ethereal glow, growing steadily brighter, moving with a silent, impossible grace directly towards my ranch. My heart, usually as steady as the desert floor, began to pound a frantic rhythm. Rusty pressed against my leg, a low growl rumbling in his chest. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my quiet life was about to become anything but. The light grew, resolving into an impossibly large, silent craft. It was sleek, dark, and utterly seamless, reflecting the faint starlight as if it were carved from the very fabric of the night. It hovered directly over my pasture, casting a vast, unearthly shadow over my home. My cattle, usually oblivious to anything but their next meal, had bunched together, lowing in fear. Then a beam of pure, gentle light, like liquid moonlight, descended from the underside of the craft, illuminating the ground near my old barn. There was no sound, no wind, just the hum of an impossible silence. And then, shapes began to emerge within that light. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a hallucination. This was happening. To me, Elias Vance, the quiet farmer of the Nevada desert? My initial fear, a cold, gripping hand in my gut, slowly gave way to an overwhelming sense of awe. The beings that emerged from the light were not what any sci-fi movie had ever prepared me for. They weren't little green men, nor were they terrifying monsters. They were tall, slender figures enveloped in robes the color of deep space, shimmering with a subtle inner light. Their faces, or what I could perceive of them, were serene, almost luminous, with large, dark, expressive eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of eons. They moved with an elegant, unhurried grace, completely silent, as if gliding on air. Rusty, surprisingly, had stopped whimpering and was now merely observing, head cocked, as if trying to understand. One of them, slightly taller than the rest, took a step forward, its gaze fixed on me, and then a voice, not spoken out loud, but echoing directly in my mind, clear as a bell, yet as gentle as a whisper across the desert wind. "Do not be afraid, Elias Vance. We mean you no harm. We have traveled far to speak with one who listens, one whose heart is open to the truths beyond your sky." My jaw was practically on the floor. Telepathy. It wasn't just a story. It was real. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my mind a whirlwind of disbelief and wonder. How did they know my name? What truths? Why me? A simple farmer? The beings seemed to sense my unspoken questions. Your world, Elias, stands at a precipice. The truths you seek are carefully hidden, but the time for silence draws to a close. We have observed your species for millennia, seen your triumphs and your struggles, but there is a grander tapestry, a vaster cosmic drama unfolding, of which your world is but a single thread. And tonight, we offer you a glimpse into that tapestry, the true history of your galaxy, riddled with conflicts you cannot even imagine, and alliances forged in the very crucible of creation. As it spoke, images, vivid and startling, began to flash through my mind. Distant stars, colossal ships, explosions of light that dwarfed anything I had ever seen. It was like looking into a kaleidoscope of cosmic history, a prologue to a story I was utterly unprepared for. And it was just beginning.
The alien, whose name I later learned translated roughly as Lyra, gestured towards the ground near the light beam. Another of their kind placed a small, dark crystalline object on the parched earth. As Lyra focused her luminous gaze on it, the crystal pulsed with a soft internal light, and then a shimmering, three-dimensional projection bloomed above it. It was like nothing I had ever seen, a holographic map, not of Earth, but of our entire galaxy, the Milky Way, swirling and vast, alive with countless stars. Your history books, Elias, Lyra's voice echoed in my mind, speak of empires and conquests on a planetary scale. But the true saga of this galaxy began eons before your species even took its first steps. Long, long ago, when many of your stars were still young, two dominant civilizations emerged in this spiral arm. The Kalan, explorers and philosophers, and the Vorlag, conquerors and engineers. Their ideologies were diametrically opposed, and their paths inevitably collided. As she spoke, the holographic map shifted. Certain star systems on one side of the galaxy began to glow with a gentle blue, representing the Kalan, while others on the opposite side flared with a fierce red for the Vorlag. Lyra continued. The Kalan believed in the organic evolution of life, in nurturing emerging civilizations and guiding them towards peace and understanding. They valued knowledge above all else, sharing their advancements only when a species was ready. The Vorlag, however, saw the galaxy as a resource to be harvested, civilizations as tools to be assimilated or eliminated. They were driven by an insatiable need for expansion. Their technology focused solely on domination. This fundamental difference sparked the first truly devastating galactic war, a conflict that lasted for countless human centuries, reshaping entire star systems and leaving scars across the cosmic landscape that are visible even today if you know where to look. And tonight, Elias, you will see those scars. The holographic map pulsed, showing rapid expansions and retreats of the blue and red lights, a silent, breathtaking ballet of ancient warfare on an unimaginable scale. As Lyra continued her silent narration, the holographic map before me vividly illustrated the ebb and flow of this colossal conflict. The Kalan, though formidable in their wisdom and defensive strategies, were ultimately outmatched by the sheer aggressive might and superior weaponry of the Vorlag, she explained. The Vorlag didn't just conquer planets, they assimilated entire species into their vast empire, stripping them of their unique cultures, their histories, and even their biological distinctiveness, remolding them into loyal servants of the Vorlag collective. This period became known as the Great Assimilation, The red areas on the galactic map began to swell, engulfing more and more of the blue, the lights flickering out like dying stars. Images flooded my mind, not just of starships battling, but of entire worlds being transformed. I saw cities built on geometric brutalist principles, colossal mining operations stripping planets bare, and populations of diverse species, once vibrant and free, now moving with a chilling, unified purpose under the Vorlag banner. It was a terrifying vision of absolute control, a galaxy consumed by a single, monolithic will. The Kalan, Lyra conveyed, were not defeated in a single climactic battle, but slowly, relentlessly pushed back to the very edges of the known galaxy, their numbers dwindling, their philosophy of peace seemingly unable to stem the tide of such aggressive expansion. In their desperation, Lyra's voice resonated with a hint of sorrow. The Kalan retreated to a hidden cluster of stars, a nebula they had painstakingly cloaked from all Vorlag detection. They poured all their remaining knowledge and resources into a single, audacious project. Not a weapon of destruction, but a sanctuary, a seed of hope. They knew that overt conflict was lost. Their only path to survival and to the eventual rebalancing of the galaxy lay in patience, in preservation, and in the careful, secret cultivation of new alliances. They prepared for a long wait, knowing that the Vorlag Empire, for all its might, carried the seeds of its own downfall within its expansionist nature. The holographic map contracted, showing a small, bright blue cluster retreating to a shadowy corner of the vast galactic projection, while the red dominated nearly everything else, a chilling testament to the Vorlag's triumph.
With the Kalan largely in hiding, the Vorlag Empire knew an unprecedented era of expansion. Lyra showed me visions of their golden age, a terrifying utopia built on the subjugation of countless worlds. Their technology advanced at an exponential rate, fueled by the diverse minds they assimilated and the resources they relentlessly plundered. Colossal megastructures pierced the skies of conquered planets, star-spanning fleets patrolled every sector, and their control over the flow of information was absolute. Every species under their dominion was integrated into the collective, their individual identity slowly eroded by a pervasive telepathic network that ensured loyalty and obedience. It was efficient, powerful, and utterly devoid of genuine freedom. However, Elias, Lyra's thoughts took on a more somber tone. Such absolute power, built on the suppression of others, is inherently unstable. The Vorlag, for all their might, grew complacent. They became inward-looking, convinced of their own invincibility. They saw no threats, for they had crushed all overt opposition. But life, in its myriad forms, always finds a way. Whispers of rebellion, small acts of defiance began to stir in the forgotten corners of their vast empire. Not open war, but subtle sabotage, the quiet sharing of forbidden knowledge, the nurturing of hope in the shadows. I saw fleeting images of disguised messages, hidden meetings in the dark underbellies of Vorlag cities, and the faint, almost imperceptible spark of defiance in the eyes of subjugated beings. Lyra explained, their focus on outward expansion meant they neglected the unseen threats, the quiet forces that operate on a different plane. And as their physical empire solidified, a new, unforeseen danger began to emerge from the void between galaxies, a parasitic intelligence, formless and ancient, drawn by the immense energy signature of the Vorlag's vast psychic network. It was a beacon for them, a feast waiting to be consumed. The holographic map of the galaxy, so recently a beacon of red, now began to show faint, spreading tendrils of a dark, almost translucent shadow subtly creeping in from the edges. The parasitic intelligence Lyra described was unlike anything my human mind could truly grasp. It had no physical form in the traditional sense, but it manifested as a chilling void, a drain on all life and energy. We call them the Void Weavers, Lyra conveyed, for they weave shadows where light once thrived and silence where life once sang. They traverse the vast emptiness between galaxies, drawn to concentrated sources of conscious energy, like the colossal psychic network that the Vorlag had established to control their empire. It was a beacon for them, a feast waiting to be consumed. The holographic projection pulsed, and the dark tendrils from the void now seemed to coalesce, forming shadowy, almost skeletal shapes that began to subtly infiltrate the red Vorlag areas. The Vorlag, for all their technological prowess, were completely blindsided. Their weapons, designed for physical combat, were useless against an enemy that attacked consciousness itself. They tried to sever parts of their network, to isolate affected sectors, but the Void Weavers were too swift, too pervasive. They didn't destroy, they simply consumed. Worlds would go silent, their populations left as empty, vegetative husks, their vibrant minds absorbed into the collective parasite. Panic began to ripple through the rigid Vorlag hierarchy, a feeling they hadn't known in millennia. Their perfect, controlled empire was crumbling, not from external invasion, but from an internal, unseen enemy that devoured the very essence of their power. It was a slow, agonizing death for the Vorlag, Lyra said, her mental voice tinged with a detached observation. A poetic justice, perhaps, for their own history of assimilation. They who had taken so much life now had their own life taken, piece by piece. The Kalan, observing from their hidden sanctuary, saw this unfolding tragedy. Despite their long conflict, there was no joy in witnessing such a devastating end. They knew that if the Void Weavers consumed the Vorlag, they would then turn their attention to other life-rich regions of the galaxy. A new, far greater threat had emerged, one that demanded a unity never before seen. The holographic map of the galaxy, so recently a beacon of red, now began to show faint, spreading tendrils of a dark, almost translucent shadow subtly creeping in from the edges. And for the first time, a small, vibrant blue spark from the Kalan's hidden cluster began to subtly pulse, almost imperceptibly, as if awakening to a new, urgent purpose.
The Kalan, having witnessed the devastating fall of their ancient enemies, understood the new gravity of the situation. The Void Weavers were not just a threat to the Vorlog, they were an existential threat to all sentient life in the galaxy, Lyra conveyed. The Kalan knew they could not defeat this enemy alone, nor could they stand by and watch the entire galaxy become a silent graveyard. A radical shift in strategy was needed. They emerged from their hidden sanctuary, not with weapons, but with an offer of knowledge. An olive branch extended even to the remnants of their former foes and to the countless subjugated species of the dying Vorlog Empire. On the holographic map, the small blue Kalan cluster expanded slightly, emitting soft, searching tendrils of light towards the now grayed-out and shadowed Vorlog sectors. This was a moment that defied millennia of hatred and conflict. The Kalan, through their deep understanding of consciousness and communication, began to reach out to the scattered, traumatized survivors of the Vorlog's assimilation. They found pockets of resistance, worlds that had maintained some semblance of their original identity despite generations of oppression. They offered them guidance, protection, and a path to reclaim their individuality. But more importantly, they offered them a chance to understand the Void Weavers, to comprehend an enemy that couldn't be fought with brute force. It was a painstaking, delicate process built on trust that had to be earned after eons of mistrust. The Kalan's greatest strength had always been their knowledge, not their martial power, Lyra emphasized. They understood the nature of consciousness, the intricate web of life. They discovered that the Void Weavers were vulnerable not to energy blasts, but to a concentrated, unified force of positive, creative thought. A cacophony of fear and despair was their sustenance, but a harmony of hope and will was their undoing. This was the blueprint for their new desperate alliance, to gather enough sentient minds willing to project a unified counterfrequency of pure life energy to repel the parasitic invaders. It was a strategy utterly alien to the Vorlog's destructive mindset, and one that required an unprecedented act of faith and unity from disparate species across the galaxy. The holographic map pulsed with the growing network of blue light, slowly connecting to various grayed-out zones, forming intricate, resilient patterns against the encroaching shadow.
The alliance that formed was a patchwork of species, some ancient, others newly freed from Vorlog dominion, all united by the common threat of the Void Weavers. Lyra showed me images of these diverse beings, side by side, learning Kalan techniques of mental projection and unified consciousness. It wasn't a battle fought with lasers and explosions, but with minds. Each species brought its unique vibrational frequency of life and thought, and a Kalan helped them harmonize these into a powerful collective song of existence. It was a beautiful, terrifying sight, an army of minds preparing for war on a spiritual plane. The chosen battleground was a sector of the galaxy where the Void Weavers had established a strong foothold, turning multiple star systems into silent, lifeless husks. The Alliance fleets, composed of converted Vorlog vessels and newly constructed Kalan ships, were not there to fight, but to provide protective shields and act as conduits for the collective consciousness. The true conflict unfolded within the minds of every participant, a telepathic pushback against the parasitic void. I saw projections of ships holding formation, their hulls glowing with the immense psychic energy being channeled through them, while inside, beings of every conceivable form sat in silent meditation, their faces etched with intense focus, sweat beading on their brows. The scale of this mental combat was staggering. I felt a faint echo of the sheer pressure, the terrifying vacuum of the Void Weavers, a hunger that threatened to consume everything. And then the counterforce, a wave of pure, vibrant life, a collective scream of existence pushing back against the encroaching nothingness. It wasn't an instant victory. It was a brutal, protracted struggle, with moments of despair when the void threatened to overwhelm. But the unity held. The Kalan's foresight, the resilience of the freed species, and the sheer will to survive created a resonance that the Void Weavers could not consume. Slowly, agonizingly, the shadows began to recede, not destroyed, but repelled, pushed back into the intergalactic void from whence they came. It was a victory, Lyra concluded, not of power, but of spirit, a testament to the enduring strength of unified life against existential emptiness.
The victory against the Void Weavers marked a profound turning point for the entire galaxy. The parasites were not annihilated, Elias, Lyra clarified. For true annihilation is a concept that transcends even our understanding. But they were repelled, pushed back into the intergalactic void, their hunger for our galaxy temporarily sated. The scars they left were deep, entire star systems rendered lifeless, their energy signature permanently diminished. But from this crucible of shared suffering and unity, a new galactic order began to emerge, one founded on cooperation and mutual respect, a stark contrast to the old Vorlag dominance and Kalan isolation. The holographic map now showed the galaxy free of the aggressive red and the creeping shadow. Instead, a delicate, interconnected web of soft, vibrant light pulsed across the spiral arm, linking diverse star systems in a harmonious network. The Kalan, rather than returning to their hidden sanctuary, became the architects of this new peace. They shared their wisdom, their technology, and their understanding of the cosmos, helping the newly freed species rebuild and rediscover their unique identities. The former Vorlag territories, once stripped bare, slowly began to recover, nourished by the collective efforts of the Alliance. It was a painstaking process, but one driven by a collective commitment to a future where such devastating conflicts, both internal and external, would never again threaten the delicate balance of life. This was the true Golden Age, born not of conquest, but of profound understanding and shared purpose. Your world, Elias, Lyra's voice grew softer, more direct, is a young one, still grappling with its own internal conflicts and the nascent understanding of its place in the wider cosmos. Your species is on the cusp of discovering these truths for yourselves. But the path you choose, whether it mirrors the destructive ambition of the Vorlag or the unifying wisdom of the Kalan, will determine your fate. We watch, we observe, and sometimes when the time is right, we make contact with those who are ready to listen. Like you, Elias Vance, the quiet farmer who opened his heart to the stars. The holographic map gently faded, replaced by the soft, ambient glow of the alien craft.
Lyra and her companions stood before me, their luminous forms radiating a sense of profound peace and ancient wisdom. The immense silent craft still hovered above my pasture, a silent sentinel in the pre-dawn darkness. The truth they had unveiled, the history of galactic empires, devastating wars, and an ultimate triumph of unity, had completely reshaped my understanding of reality. My quiet life in the Nevada desert, once a refuge from complexity, now felt like a mere blink in the grand cosmic eye. I was no longer just Elias Vance, the farmer. I was a witness, entrusted with a piece of a truth so vast it could humble entire civilizations. The knowledge you now possess, Elias, Lyra's voice resonated in my mind, softer now, tinged with a farewell. It is a heavy burden and a profound gift. It is not yours to wield for power, but to share as a seed of understanding when and where you deem appropriate. Your species is on its own journey, and interference is not our way. But awareness is the first step towards a different future. Look to the stars, not just as distant points of light, but as homes, as histories, as living entities in a universe far more intricate and interconnected than you can yet comprehend. Your Earth is a jewel, a nascent world of immense potential, and its choices in the coming era will echo across the cosmos. Her gaze, deep and knowing, held mine for a long moment, imprinting a sense of responsibility I knew I would carry forever. Slowly, gracefully, Lyra and her companions began to recede, dissolving back into the gentle beam of light that descended from their craft. The light beam retracted. The large, dark vessel began its silent descent, rising effortlessly into the pre-dawn sky. It shrunk from view, becoming a final twinkling star that quickly faded into the vastness above. The silence that followed was immense, deeper than before, broken only by the distant howl of a coyote and the soft rustle of the desert wind. Rusty, now calm, nudged my hand, looking up at me as if to ask, "What just happened?" I looked up at the first blush of dawn painting the eastern sky, the familiar desert stretching out before me, yet utterly transformed. I was still Elias Vance, the farmer in Nevada, but I had seen the truth beyond the stars, and the universe would never be quiet again.